Friday the 13th wasn't just another teen slasher film, it was the birth of an icon that would change horror forever. What audiences never realized is that behind the camera, the production was as chaotic as the bloodshed on screen. From a desperate director mortgaging his house to fund the film, to special effects genius Tom Savini slicing his own finger during a knife stunt, to a script that was still being written as filming began, Camp Crystal Lake was a real-life nightmare for its creators. Today we're diving into 20 weird facts about Friday the 13th that will forever change how you see this slasher classic. And stick around until the end for our bonus fact that explains how one bizarre studio decision almost killed the entire franchise before it even started. Let's slice into the bloody truth behind one of horror's most iconic films. Fact number 1. Friday the 13th wasn't created out of artistic vision, it was pure business opportunism. Director Sean S. Cunningham had seen John Carpenter's Halloween rake in massive profits on a tiny budget, and he wanted a piece of that action. So desperate was Cunningham to capitalize on the slasher trend that he took out a full-page ad in Variety magazine announcing the film before he even had a script, a cast, or financing. The ad simply featured the title Friday the 13th crashing through glass with the tagline, "The most terrifying film ever made." What's wild is that this bold move actually worked. The ad generated enough interest that Cunningham secured financing within weeks. Talk about fake it till you make it. The entire genesis of one of horror's most successful franchises came from a director essentially bluffing his way into production.
At least we know what's for dinner.
Fact number 2. The film's iconic kikiki mamama sound effect wasn't some carefully orchestrated audio design. It was composer Harry Manfredini's voice. The distinctive sound that's now synonymous with Jason Voorhees didn't come from expensive studio equipment or musical instruments. It came from Manfredini himself, whispering, "Kikiki mamama," into a microphone, a shortened version of "Kill, kill, kill, mom, mom, mom." He was trying to recreate what he imagined would be the voice in Mrs. Voorhees' head as she heard her son Jason urging her to kill. Manfredini then ran his vocals through an echo chamber to create the eerie effect. This homemade sound would go on to become one of the most recognizable audio cues in horror history, proving that sometimes the most effective scares come from the simplest techniques, not elaborate orchestration, but a man in a studio whispering into a microphone created cinema's most enduring slasher soundtrack. Fact number 3. The gruesome arrow-through-the-throat kill almost caused actor Kevin Bacon to pass out on set. What audiences didn't know is that filming the infamous scene where Kevin Bacon's character, Jack, gets an arrow thrust up through his neck from below the bed was a brutal ordeal that lasted nearly 8 hours. Special effects wizard Tom Savini built a prosthetic neck and torso cast of Bacon, but the execution was anything but smooth. The effect required Bacon to sit with his head poking through a hole in the bed, while the fake torso was positioned above him. The problem? The setup forced Bacon to maintain an intensely uncomfortable position for hours as Savini perfected the shot. Blood tubes kept clogging, the prosthetic arrow wouldn't penetrate properly, and Bacon later revealed he nearly blacked out multiple times from holding the awkward position. What makes this even more remarkable is that despite this tortuous filming experience, the sequence lasts mere seconds on screen, but became one of the most memorable kills in slasher history. Fact number 4. Jason Voorhees, the franchise's iconic killer, wasn't even supposed to appear in the original film. The shocking truth is that the script never called for Jason to make any physical appearance. The original ending simply concluded with final girl Alice defeating Mrs. Voorhees, then resting peacefully in a canoe on Crystal Lake. But makeup artist Tom Savini and director Sean Cunningham felt the movie needed one final jolt. In a last-minute decision, they cast Ari Lehman, a 14-year-old who happened to be working nearby on another project, as young Jason. The deformed boy was hastily added to jump out of the lake and drag Alice under in a dream sequence. This impromptu decision, made purely to give audiences one final scare, inadvertently created one of horror's most enduring villains. Without this spontaneous addition, the hockey-masked killer, who would go on to star in 11 subsequent films, might never have emerged from Crystal Lake's waters at all. Fact number 5. Betsy Palmer, who played killer Mrs. Voorhees, only took the role because she needed a new car. When established actress Betsy Palmer received the Friday the 13th script, she didn't see a career-defining role. She saw a piece of junk that could pay for her broken-down Mercedes. Palmer, who had been a respected television and film actress since the 1950s, needed $10,000 for a new car after hers broke down on a California highway. When the Friday the 13th offer came with exactly that paycheck, Palmer accepted what she thought would be a forgotten B-movie that no one would ever see. She even told friends the script was a piece of trash. The actress had no idea that her desperate need for reliable transportation would lead to creating one of horror's most memorable villains. Palmer later embraced her unexpected legacy, appearing at conventions and celebrating with fans. What began as automotive desperation transformed into the most iconic role of her lengthy career, proving sometimes the roles we take for the worst reasons become our most enduring.
Just wait until he lands on my old Kentucky home.
Fact number 6. The film's iconic setting, Camp Crystal Lake, was a functioning Boy Scout camp that was actively operating during filming. Camp No Be Bosco in Blairstown, New Jersey, wasn't just a movie set. It was and still is a real Boy Scout camp that remained partially operational during production. The filmmakers could only shoot Monday through Thursday because actual scouts would arrive for weekend activities, meaning the crew had to constantly set up and break down their equipment. What audiences didn't realize is that many scenes were filmed under extreme time pressure. The production team often had mere hours to capture crucial shots before scouts would come streaming in. This led to chaotic filming conditions, where scenes were hastily shot with minimal rehearsal time. Even more bizarre, the camp staff and local teens kept trying to sneak onto the set to watch filming, forcing production to hire security guards. Today, the camp occasionally hosts official Friday the 13th tours for die-hard fans, making it one of the few slasher film locations you can actually visit if you're brave enough. Fact for 7. The weather during filming was so brutally cold that the lake scenes nearly caused hypothermia. Friday the 13th portrays a summer camp during peak season, but the reality on set was drastically different. Filmed in September and October in New Jersey, temperatures plummeted so low that actors' breath was visible, forcing costly reshoots and creative camera angles to maintain the summer illusion. For water scenes, conditions were downright dangerous. When Adrienne King filmed her canoe sequences, the lake was so cold that medics stood by with thermal blankets between takes. King later revealed she couldn't feel her legs after just minutes in the water. For the final lake confrontation, King was shivering so severely that crew members had to massage her limbs between takes to prevent hypothermia. Most shocking was young Ari Lehman's experience as Jason. For his brief scene jumping from the lake, he was submerged in the freezing water for so long that his lips turned blue. The panic on King's face when Jason grabs her, that wasn't entirely acting. She was genuinely suffering from the extreme cold. Fact number 8. The film's screenplay was written in less than 2 weeks by a writer who had never seen a horror movie. Screenwriter Victor Miller had built his career writing soap operas and children's television when director Sean Cunningham approached him about penning a scary movie to capitalize on Halloween's success. Miller's response? "I've never even seen a horror film." Cunningham didn't care. He just needed a script fast. Working against an impossible deadline, Miller cranked out the entire screenplay in just 9 days. Having never watched a horror movie, he approached the story from a psychological angle instead. Miller focused on Mrs. Voorhees' maternal grief, rather than supernatural elements, creating a villain driven by the very human emotion of loss, the irony. This horror novice's rushed work would establish tropes that defined the slasher genre for decades. Miller later admitted he simply reversed the gender dynamics of Psycho, making the killer a mother rather than a son. His lack of horror knowledge actually helped create something fresh, a testament to how sometimes the least experienced person brings the most original perspective. Fact number 9. The infamous decapitation of Mrs. Voorhees required a mannequin that looked nothing like actress Betsy Palmer. Tom Savini's gruesome beheading effect in the film's climax has become legendary in horror circles. But what audiences don't know is that the head they see tumbling to the ground looks almost nothing like Betsy Palmer. Working with a minuscule budget, Savini couldn't afford to create a perfect likeness of the actress. The mannequin head was so obviously different that Cunningham had to employ creative editing to hide the discrepancy. He used rapid cuts between Palmer's actual performance and the dummy, hoping viewers wouldn't notice the sudden change in appearance. The gamble paid off. The scene's shocking violence distracted audiences from scrutinizing the fake head too closely. Even more surprising, the prop head was stuffed with animal organs Savini purchased from a local butcher that morning. During filming, these real organs began to rot under the hot lights, creating such a putrid smell that crew members vomited on set. Movie magic isn't always glamorous. Sometimes it's just rotting meat and clever editing.
Sucker's locked.
Fact number 10. Kevin Bacon was paid just $1,000 for his role and was desperately broke at the time. Before he was a household name, Kevin Bacon was a struggling actor who took the role of Jack in Friday the 13th simply to pay his rent. His entire paycheck for the film was just $1,000, barely enough to cover his New York apartment for a month. Bacon was so financially desperate that he walked to the set each day to save bus fare. What audiences didn't realize while watching Jack's dramatic death scene is that Bacon would return to a nearly empty apartment each night, eating ramen noodles because he couldn't afford proper meals. The future star later recalled having to choose between buying toilet paper or coffee some mornings. Go ahead and like and subscribe because we're about to reveal how this $1,000 gig that Bacon was initially embarrassed by became one of the smartest career moves he ever made. His performance in this low-budget slasher led directly to his breakout role in Diner, launching a career that would span decades and create the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon phenomenon. Fact 11. The iconic ch-ch-ch-ah-ah-ah sound effect that everyone associates with the film is actually a misconception. For decades, fans have mimicked what they thought was ch-ch-cha-ah-ah as the signature Friday the 13th sound. But composer Harry Manfredini has repeatedly corrected this popular misconception. The actual sound is kikiki ma ma ma, meant to represent kill, 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 mom, mom, mom. From Jason's perspective, this widespread misinterpretation shows how films can take on lives of their own in popular culture. What's fascinating is that even the franchise itself eventually embraced the error. In later sequels, sound designers began intentionally mixing the effect to sound more like the misheard ch-ch-ch version because that's what audiences expected to hear. The phenomenon demonstrates how audience perception can actually reshape a film's legacy. The wrong version became so culturally embedded that it eventually became the right version, a rare instance where fans literally changed how a movie sounds through collective misremembering. Even today, official merchandise and marketing materials use the incorrect ch-ch-ch interpretation. Fact number 12, the film's twist ending was stolen from another horror movie, and the director knew it. Friday the 13th's shocking finale, where Jason jumps out of the lake to grab the final girl, wasn't an original idea. Director Sean Cunningham deliberately lifted the concept from Brian De Palma's 1976 film Carrie, which ends with a similar dream sequence jump scare. Cunningham never hid this fact. He openly admitted wanting to replicate the jolt audiences felt when Carrie's hand shoots out of the grave. In fact, he screened Carrie for his entire crew and told cinematographer Barry Abrams, "This is exactly what we need for our ending." The filmmakers knew they were borrowing another film's climactic moment, but calculated that the guaranteed scream from audiences was worth the creative theft. What's remarkable is how this borrowed scare would ultimately eclipse its inspiration. While Carrie's ending remains famous, Friday the 13th's lake jump became so iconic that it spawned 11 sequels and established Jason Voorhees as a horror legend, all from an ending that wasn't even original. Fact Stirker 13. Tom Savini created the film's groundbreaking special effects using techniques he learned photographing real death in Vietnam. The graphic violence that shocked 1980s audiences wasn't just movie magic. It was informed by real-world horror. Special effects master Tom Savini served as a combat photographer during the Vietnam War, where he documented actual casualties and death scenes. This grim experience gave him a macabre reference library for creating realistic wound patterns and blood spray. What viewers didn't know while watching an arrow pierce Kevin Bacon's throat or an axe split Betsy Palmer's head is that these effects were modeled on actual combat injuries Savini had photographed. The arterial spray, when Mrs. Voorhees is beheaded, for example, was specifically designed to match what Savini had witnessed happen to soldiers in Vietnam. This brutal authenticity is why Friday the 13th's practical effects still hold up decades later. They weren't imagined violence, but recreated trauma. Savini himself has acknowledged that his war experiences gave him a disturbing advantage in horror filmmaking. "I had reference material no one should ever have to see." Fact 14. The film's most expensive scene was cut entirely from the theatrical release. In a bizarre production decision, the most costly sequence filmed for Friday the 13th, a complex crane shot establishing Camp Crystal Lake in all its glory, never made it into theaters. The shot required special equipment, additional crew, and an entire day of filming, consuming a significant portion of the movie's tiny budget. What's more shocking is why it was cut. Test audiences were too impatient. Early screenings revealed that viewers wanted to get to the killings faster, so editor Bill Frieda ruthlessly trimmed the boring parts, including this expensive establishing sequence. Producer-director Sean Cunningham reluctantly agreed, sacrificing production value for pacing. The scene only survived in early television broadcasts where networks needed to fill time after trimming the graphic violence. For decades, many fans had no idea this lost footage even existed until it was finally restored in special edition releases. This demonstrates the harsh reality of horror filmmaking. Sometimes artistry takes a back seat to audience bloodlust. Fact 15. Adrienne King, who played final girl Alice, was stalked by an obsessed fan after the film's release, forcing her to quit acting. The horror of Friday the 13th didn't end when the cameras stopped rolling for Adrienne King. Following the film's massive success, King gained an obsessive stalker who repeatedly broke into her home and threatened her life. The terrifying ordeal culminated in a violent confrontation where King narrowly escaped. This real-life nightmare so traumatized the actress that she retreated from public life and abandoned her promising acting career. Despite being positioned as the franchise's potential ongoing heroine, similar to Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween, King requested that her character be killed off in the sequel's opening minutes so she could escape the spotlight. King disappeared from Hollywood for nearly 30 years, taking refuge in a career as a voice actor where she could work anonymously. It wasn't until 2009 that she cautiously returned to on-screen roles. The cruel irony? The actress who so convincingly portrayed a woman being stalked and terrorized on screen became a victim of similar trauma in real life, a devastating case of art horrifically imitating life. Fact number 16. The movie was filmed at the same time and location as another slasher film, and they shared resources. In one of horror's strangest coincidences, another slasher movie, The Burning, 1981, was being filmed at a nearby camp during the same weeks as Friday the 13th. The productions were aware of each other and, in a surprising show of camaraderie, actually shared resources. When Friday the 13th needed extra props or equipment, they'd borrow from The Burning, and vice versa. The two rival productions even shared some crew members who would work on one film during the day and the other at night. Perhaps most remarkably, both films hired special effects wizard Tom Savini, who somehow managed to create groundbreaking gore for both productions simultaneously. This bizarre production overlap extended to casting. Several actors auditioned for both films on the same day, with Holly Hunter famously being rejected by Friday the 13th, but landing a small role in The Burning. The films were effectively sister productions. Competing slashers conceived, filmed, and released within months of each other, forever linked by their shared New Jersey woods and intertwined production histories. Fact number 17. The MPAA forced the filmmakers to cut 10 seconds from every death scene, but audiences still thought it was the goriest film ever. Friday the 13th wasn't just violent by 1980 standards, it was considered shocking even by the filmmakers themselves. The original cut was so graphic that the Motion Picture Association of America demanded nearly a minute of cuts before granting an R rating instead of the commercially devastating X. Director Sean Cunningham and editor Bill Frieda developed a crafty workaround. Rather than eliminating entire death scenes, they trimmed approximately 10 seconds from each kill, just enough to satisfy the ratings board while preserving the impact. The strategy worked brilliantly. Despite having significant violence removed, audiences still perceived the film as unprecedentedly gory. What's fascinating is that this censorship actually enhanced the film's reputation. The trimmed version suggested even more violence than it showed, allowing viewers' imaginations to fill in the gruesome gaps. When Paramount eventually released the uncut version years later, many fans were surprised to discover that the full gore version wasn't actually much more explicit than what they'd imagined. Sometimes what's implied is more disturbing than what's shown. Fact number 18. Filming was constantly interrupted by strange noises that couldn't be explained. The production of Friday the 13th was plagued by mysterious sounds that the crew could never identify. During crucial quiet scenes, strange knockings, rustlings, and what some described as whispers would disrupt filming, requiring countless retakes. Sound recordist Richard Murphy initially blamed local wildlife, but the noises persisted even after thorough sweeps of the surrounding forest. Some crew members became convinced the camp was actually haunted, with rumors spreading that a boy had drowned in the lake years earlier, eerily mirroring the film's plot about Jason Voorhees. These disruptions became so frequent that director Sean Cunningham established a noise protocol. Whenever the mysterious sounds occurred, the entire crew would freeze in place to help identify the source. Despite these efforts, many of the sounds remained unexplained. Sound designer Tasso Leokis later incorporated some of these actual recorded anomalies into the film's audio mix, meaning some of the atmospheric sounds heard in the final movie are the very same unexplained noises that spooked the crew during production. Fact number 19. The film's twist villain was revealed in the trailer, but audiences were still shocked. In a marketing decision that would be unthinkable today, Paramount's theatrical trailer for Friday the 13th actually showed Mrs. Voorhees as the killer, spoiling the film's major twist. The preview explicitly featured shots of Betsy Palmer wielding a knife and hunting the counselors. Yet, remarkably, most audiences still reported being surprised when Mrs. Voorhees was revealed as the murderer. How was this possible? The answer lies in 1980s viewing habits. Most theatergoers didn't study trailers the way modern audiences do. Many people saw the film without having viewed the trailer at all, while others simply didn't connect the brief shots of an older woman in the preview with the film's mystery killer. This fortunate oversight saved the film's twist ending, allowing it to shock viewers despite the marketing department's careless reveal. The incident taught Hollywood a valuable lesson about protecting plot twists, one that modern studios follow religiously, protecting surprise villains with NDAs and misleading trailers. Friday the 13th's near-spoiler disaster unwittingly helped create today's spoiler-averse culture. Fact number 20, the film's massive success saved Paramount Pictures from financial collapse. What most viewers never realized is that while teenagers were being slaughtered on screen, Friday the 13th was actually rescuing a major Hollywood studio behind the scenes. Paramount Pictures was teetering on financial disaster after a string of expensive flops in the late 1970s, including Heaven's Gate, one of the most notorious box office disasters in history. The studio reluctantly agreed to distribute Friday the 13th, which they considered beneath them, but they needed any potential hit they could get. Made for just $550,000 and acquired for minimal distribution costs, the film grossed nearly $40 million domestically, an almost unheard of 70x return on investment. This unexpected windfall quite literally saved Paramount from potential bankruptcy. The studio that had won Oscars and produced The Godfather was rescued by a low-budget slasher film they were initially embarrassed to release. Friday the 13th's massive profits gave Paramount the financial cushion they desperately needed, allowing them to recover and fund their prestige projects of the 1980s. Without this trashy horror film, one of Hollywood's most storied studios might have collapsed entirely.
Hello.
The most shocking fact about Friday the 13th is that its most iconic elements, Jason as the killer and his signature hockey mask, weren't part of the original vision at all. The first film was conceived as a standalone movie with Mrs. Voorhees as the only villain. Jason's brief appearance was meant to be nothing more than a final nightmare sequence. When unexpected success prompted Paramount to demand a sequel, the writers faced a dilemma. The killer was dead. In a desperate move, they decided to resurrect Jason, who had supposedly drowned as a child, as an adult killer seeking revenge for his mother's death. This massive continuity problem was hand-waved away with minimal explanation. Even then, the hockey mask still didn't exist. In Friday the 13th Part 2, Jason wore a simple bag over his head. It wasn't until the third film that a crew member happened to have a hockey mask on set during a break. Someone jokingly put it on, and director Steve Miner had an epiphany. This would become Jason's new look. The franchise's most recognizable element, so iconic it's now synonymous with horror itself, came from an impromptu joke during filming of the third installment. The hockey-masked killer, who would terrorize pop culture for decades, was never part of the plan. Just a happy accident that transformed cinematic history. What began as a cynical cash grab to capitalize on Halloween's success transformed into something far more enduring. Friday the 13th wasn't supposed to launch a franchise spanning 12 films, a television series, novels, comic books, and video games. It wasn't supposed to create a cultural icon whose hockey mask is instantly recognizable worldwide. And it certainly wasn't supposed to fundamentally reshape horror cinema for the next 4 decades. The film that Paramount was initially embarrassed to release ended up not just saving the studio financially, but permanently altering the landscape of American horror. From a rushed production with a 9-day script emerged a phenomenon that continues to terrify new generations, proving that sometimes the most enduring nightmares are the ones we never see coming. If you enjoyed these shocking revelations about Friday the 13th, go ahead and slash that like button and subscribe for more behind-the-scenes horror stories, and let us know in the comments which Friday the 13th sequel is your favorite. Remember, as Mrs. Voorhees taught us, camp counselors should always keep an eye on the water. Always.